exist, not as an abstract riddle for philosophers in quiet rooms, not as a clever argument on a page, but here, in the real world, where children die before they understand life, where cities burn while the sky says nothing, where innocent people suffer in ways so brutal that language itself feels too small to hold them. This is the question people ask when easy answers collapse. It arrives at night. It arrives after the funeral, after the diagnosis, after the war report, after the prayer that seemed to rise and vanish into silence. We are told that God is loving. We are told that God is powerful. We are told that nothing escapes his sight. And yet the world still bleeds openly, repeatedly, almost without interruption. So what are we supposed to do with that contradiction? Accept it? Explain it? Worship through it? Or finally admit that this question is dangerous because it does not just challenge religion, it challenges trust itself. If God is good, why is evil still here? And if evil is still here, what exactly does that say about God? Every war, every funeral, every bombed apartment, every child crying in a hospital bed, every mother waiting for someone who will never come home, every betrayal, every courtroom where justice is delayed until it becomes meaningless, every prison cell filled by the innocent, every act of cruelty committed in daylight while the rest of the world scrolls past it and moves on. Human history keeps returning to the same wound. We build civilizations, write moral codes, create religions, promise progress, and still evil survives everything. It survives kings, empires, revolutions, technologies, and ideals. It changes its language, its uniforms, its symbols, but it does not disappear. And each time tragedy strikes, humanity asks the same question again. Where is God? Not in poetry, not in doctrine, not in polished theology. Where is God when pain becomes personal enough to destroy sleep? When grief moves into a house and refuses to leave? When evil is no longer a concept, but a face, a name, a voice you used to love? Suffering has a brutal gift. It makes cheap answers impossible. For thousands of years, philosophers and theologians have tried to confront this question with logic, because logic feels safer than grief. Their argument is simple, almost painfully simple, and that is exactly why it cuts so deep. If God is all-powerful, he could stop evil. If God is all-loving, he would want to stop evil. Yet evil remains. So something in the picture seems to crack. Either God is not powerful enough to intervene, or not loving enough to care, or perhaps not what believers have claimed at all. This is the problem that has haunted human thought for centuries, because it forces faith into direct collision with reality. Heaven enters the frame here with softness, but not with weakness. She does not deny the contradiction. She only asks whether the contradiction might say more about the limits of human understanding than about the absence of God. Hell hears the same question and almost smiles, because to her, complexity often sounds like a beautiful way of postponing the obvious. If suffering is everywhere, maybe the simplest answer is still the most honest one. Heaven speaks first. She says love without freedom is not love at all. A world where no one can choose evil may sound peaceful, but it would also be a world where no one truly chooses good. No courage tested by fear. No mercy offered when revenge would feel easier. No forgiveness that costs something. No sacrifice that means anything. Only obedience programmed into the structure of existence. A perfect machine, perhaps, but not a moral world. Hell answers with cold precision. Convenient, she says. Elegant. Almost beautiful. But elegance dies the moment real suffering enters the room. Tell the grieving parent that their child's pain was necessary, so freedom could remain meaningful. Tell the abused that the universe required their suffering, so humanity could preserve the dignity of choice. Suddenly, the theory loses its beauty. Suddenly, it sounds expensive. And the worst part is this: the people paying the price are almost never the people defending the theory. Then the argument moves from heaven to history. Evil is not only something that happens to humanity. Again and again, it is something humanity creates. Someone signs an order knowing it will kill. Someone profits from lies. Someone humiliates another person because cruelty feels easier than compassion. Someone watches injustice unfold and decides silence is safer. Someone chooses greed over mercy, power over truth, convenience over conscience. And those choices do not stay small. They spread. They shape families, institutions, governments, and entire generations. This matters because it means a large part of the suffering we blame on the universe enters the world through human hands. Heaven leans into this point. She says freedom is terrifying precisely because it is real. Love can be chosen, but so can violence. Loyalty can be chosen, but so can betrayal. Courage can be chosen, but so can indifference. A world without evil might also be a world without meaningful moral choice. A world where goodness is automatic, and therefore empty. But hell is waiting for exactly that defense. She steps closer and asks the question that changes the entire temperature of the debate. If freedom creates evil, was it worth the price? Was every genocide worth preserving free will? Was every tortured child an acceptable cost of making love authentic? Was every ruined life, every violated body, every broken mind simply the necessary collateral damage of a world where choice remains sacred? Once the question is asked that way, freedom stops sounding majestic and starts sounding brutal. We would never admire a human parent who allowed preventable suffering in the name of growth or autonomy. We would call that neglect at best, cruelty at worst. So why does the standard change when the subject becomes God? Why does divine silence get renamed mystery? Why does unanswered suffering become part of some higher plan, only when heaven is the one refusing to explain itself? This is where the argument stops being abstract and becomes emotionally dangerous. Because now faith must answer not only to reason, but to grief. Heaven does not deny the weight of that question. She does something harder. She turns the mirror toward humanity. What if the real scandal is not only that evil exists, but that humans keep producing it while demanding God explain it? We ask where God is in war, but who starts the war? We ask where God is in corruption, but who takes the bribe? We ask where God is in betrayal, humiliation, abuse, greed, and cruelty. Yet over and over it is human choice that carries those things into the world. That does not solve the problem of evil. It sharpens it, because now the accusation can no longer remain safely aimed at the sky. It returns to homes, institutions, courts, armies, families, screens, private habits, and quiet acts of everyday cowardice. Evil becomes much harder to discuss once it stops looking mythic and starts looking familiar. Our face, our systems, our excuses, our silence. Maybe one reason this question has never gone away is because it reveals something we do not want to admit. Blaming God is often easier than confronting what human freedom keeps choosing when no one forces it toward the good. And this is where everything changes. Up to this point, the question seemed aimed at heaven, but now it begins turning toward earth. Maybe evil is not proof that God does not exist. Maybe it is proof that human freedom is far more powerful, far more dangerous, and far less innocent than we like to believe. That is the payoff no one enjoys, because it removes the comfort of distance. If evil were only a theological puzzle, we could discuss it forever. But if evil is also a human practice, then the argument becomes immediate. It becomes moral. It becomes personal. Not only why does God allow evil, but what am I allowing, excusing, ignoring, or creating? Suddenly, the problem is no longer trapped in philosophy. It is in homes, governments, friendships, crowds, marriages, online mobs, private resentments, and daily choices so small they barely feel like choices at all. The world is not shaped only by what heaven permits. It is shaped by what humans repeatedly do with the freedom they have been given. So maybe the most frightening truth is this: heaven and hell do not begin only after death. They begin in choice, in what we normalize, in what we excuse, in what we do when suffering is standing directly in front of us and demands a response. Hell says the world has already answered the question, and the answer is ugly. Heaven says the answer is still being written. Both are watching the same human story unfold, and both are waiting to see what we do next. Maybe evil is not proof against God. Maybe it is proof of the terrifying scale of human freedom. Or maybe the silence of God exists for one unbearable reason, so that what is human can finally be seen clearly, without excuses, without myth, without comforting distance. And if that is true, then the real horror is not that God allows evil. The real horror is how often we do, quietly, socially, politically, personally, and then call it fate because responsibility feels heavier than belief. This was only the first question. The next one may be even harder. If God gave us freedom, why does He stay silent when we use it to destroy each other? Between heaven and hell, that may be where the real mystery begins. See you in the next video, where the questions only get darker.